What makes a good real estate investment? A good investment has a high chance of success or return on your investment. But recent years have been challenging for property investors, with high interest rates and volatile property values. At the same time, increasing demands for sustainability are adding new pressures. How can an investor today ensure they get the returns they need from their sustainable property portfolio? In this episode, we examine what the main considerations are for a property investor today. How can they balance risk and opportunity and achieve their own targets for profitability and sustainability? Today, we'll talk with two experts who will share their insights into the challenges and opportunities facing real estate investors right now, both in Europe and in the United States. Let's start off with Europe. Cecilia Fasth is CEO of Stena Property, a major property investor in the Nordic and Central European markets. With her extensive experience in the real estate industry in both commercial and residential sectors, we're looking forward to tapping into Cecilia's understanding of this complex market. Cecilia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
As I said, Stena is a major real estate investor, mainly in Sweden, but also increasingly in commercial property in Poland, right? Can you tell us briefly about the company, your portfolio, and perhaps your general approach to property investment?
Stena is similar to Skanska, actually part of a larger Stena group, which consists of shipping, recycling, and then the major part is real estate. And we're a long-term investor. We're privately owned, and size-wise, we have circa 70 billion SEK, which would translate to roughly $7 billion US. And our major part consists of residential apartments or rental apartments, which is basically 75% of our portfolio. And the rest is commercial properties, primarily offices.
Okay. And what is your approach, I guess you could say, to property investment?
I mean, since we're a long-term property owner, we have three different places where we can put our money, basically. And the first one is obviously that we would like to future-proof our portfolio of the existing properties. So we try to make sure that they are attractive in the long run and work with sustainable targets, but also other things related to that. We can come back to that later. The second thing we invest in is actually as a developer. So we develop rental apartments and condominiums, primarily in Sweden, and from time to time some additional services like retail or elderly care or offices, but that's a smaller scale. It's large city developments, basically. And finally, we can also buy existing properties as investments for long term.
So in thinking of then those long-term investments, what are your main considerations as a property investor?
If we look at our existing portfolio, we have a few things that are big concerns for us. One of them are the increasing violence in society as we see across the world. And obviously when you own residential apartments in certain areas, we have to make sure that they are stable and attractive to live in. So that's a big concern for us. Another one is utilities. We will have a more unpredictable energy market in the future, but that also spills off to water and heating, which are large cost centers. So that's really important to us to address those questions. And when it comes to new construction, it's actually a little bit different. We have been concerned about escalating construction costs, but as the market has come to a downturn in Sweden at least, we see actually attractive prices there today. So our major concern is to work with reducing the embedded carbon in the construction phase, basically.
Then moving towards risk and opportunity, how do you balance risk and opportunity to achieve your targets for profitability and sustainability?
So if we keep on that track where we stay with the existing portfolio and addressing those risks that we actually have identified, we do whatever we can to mitigate that. So in terms of violence in society and unstable areas. We work a lot with what we call relationship management with our tenants. So we're supporting the local society with the schools, with the kind of make sure that you have a nice and good things to do after school. For example, we are, as an example, we have 345 employees. We give 1,000 students or younger people from our neighborhoods summer jobs. So they work with either us or partners to us to make sure that you can own your own money and have the right network, etc. So that's one way of addressing, make sure that we do whatever we can to have stable areas. We have really challenged ourselves to make sure that we connect all our properties in the existing portfolio. There are close to 500 buildings. And we have now introduced AI steering for all the heating, and we're aiming for and working towards more self-supplying electricity, which means that we invest heavily in solar and energy storage to become self-supplying on electricity. Trying to take the risk and mitigate them and turn it into opportunities rather than sitting on the side looking at that.
Right. Very interesting. You talked about AI's ability to support that balancing of risk and opportunity. Are there any other trends that you think we should be aware of in the market in general?
See, what we see very clearly is the diverging of the market, where we separate future-proofed asset, basically, or flight to quality. That trend is so much bigger today, and I think the two key things that really have changed over the last couple of years is actually how the Nordics and now also the European banks give better rates if you have a sustainable property, and that is very clear. So we have, in the larger share of our portfolio now, I think it's like 80% or so, sustainable linked loans to our assets, and that wasn't the case 2 or 3 years ago. It was less. So the banks are taking a huge shift in how they price their risk related to sustainability. So we get a better margin if we can prove that we are on a journey where we improve the rating of the properties. I would say that is a strong wind in Europe at the moment.
And then turning to properties themselves, let's dive into what makes a good investment property then.
It's always exciting to think that everything should be so complicated, but actually it's quite simple, because location will always be the first thing that we're looking at. And when we talk about location, it has to be strong public infrastructure and service surrounding, whether it's office or residential. So you can have like restaurants or other things that are attractive. So location is the first one. If we buy an existing property, we will look for potential to future-proof it. So we can apply the learnings that we have from our existing portfolio with adding solar, adding modern technique, adding AI, and so on, and make sure it's with sustainable solutions. And if we should afford that, so to speak, that we will make a quite huge investment after buying the property, it obviously have to have rental potential. If there is no potential to increase the rent level, if we have to spend huge investments on an existing property to turn it into a future-proof assets, which means that you have a modern technique, you have sustainable solutions, we can apply AI. Maybe we need to change steering equipment and put isolations and new windows, etc. If we buy an existing property with high rent levels, we will never make that work. So it needs to have a potential to increase the rent after the acquisition if it's an old property. An old property in the right location with bad standards but potential to future-proof it, we can make that business case work basically if there is a potential in increasing the rents.
On the subject of investment properties. I know that Stena recently acquired a property from Skanska in Warsaw, the first phase of the studio commercial complex. What made that an attractive investment for you? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, we decided a few years ago to enter into Poland, and we spent some time actually trying to understand the Polish economy. And what we were tempted by was the fact that Poland has outperformed Europe with GDP for almost 20 years and is forecasted to do that in the coming, say, 10 years. And there is a strong correlation between GDP growth and office demand. So we thought that that is a good trigger. But then we would like to encourage the flight to quality trend. So we are only looking for basically newly developed assets. And in Warsaw, we spent some time. You were in competition, Skanska. We looked at several offices. And the fact that we liked about this property is the fact that it's the latest technique and the latest sustainability credentials, but also absolutely best location. So it's a lot of service, nice restaurants, etc. Surrounding this and close to public infrastructure. We thought it was a good investment. And finally, I would also say size is like a sweet spot for us as well. So size-wise, it was right size for us. And when we entered into the Polish market, it was our first acquisition, and doing business with Skanska then, which is a Swedish company as well as Stena, and we had the relations. We felt quite comfortable with that, both personally, but also our board, etc., felt that that is an additional quality stamp, basically.
Ticked all your boxes there.
And that's a good way of saying it shortly.
Cecilia, thanks for those great insights into risks and opportunities in property investment today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on Shaping Sustainable Places. Even if these are challenging times for property investors, there are ways to maximize returns on a sustainable property portfolio. What are they? That brings us to our next guest. Murphy McCullough is Business Unit President for Skanska USA Commercial Development, which delivers customer-focused office, mixed-use, and multifamily properties across the U.S. Murphy, welcome to Shaping Sustainable Places.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let's start off with a first broad question, because Murphy, you work really closely with property investors in the U.S. So what's the main considerations for them today? What are they looking for?
Investors are focused primarily, especially now, on making a return on their investment. They have a number of investment choices to make, and real estate is definitely one of them. And they really are focused on trying to make sure they are being a fiduciary and making a great investment. And that includes sustainability, which is a big topic of this discussion here today.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say would be important elements of sustainability that could bring that added value that you just mentioned as an investor?
Yeah, what is interesting in the United States, it is somewhat different than Europe, and we're obviously in both markets. If you look at Europe, there's a taxonomy there. It's much more important for investors on a value front, because if a building doesn't have these features, it'll actually cost them more. In the United States, it actually is quite different. We do not have taxonomy, so it is much more of a future-proofing type of situation where folks are looking to make a good, solid, long-term investment, and they know that it's extremely important to tenants and for themselves and their goals, and so they are really looking for a building that is going to stand the test of time. And so that is something that's really important to them. And often sustainable buildings do attract more tenants. They lease up faster. There's more liquidity when you go to sell a building because there's more investors that are interested in this. And so it's really important to have it. But the value side, actually getting paid more for a building, is really tough to quantify. So it is different in these two markets.
Mm-hmm. Let's just dive into what you mentioned about the sort of long-term view. And if we look at how investors could balance risk and opportunity, when focusing on their own targets for profitability and sustainability.
Yeah. Investors, this is their customer. This is their long-term customer that are focused on, reaching net zero at some certain point in time here. It's 2040, maybe 2050 or so. And so it is definitely part of future-proofing their buildings to have a very sustainable building. And, we're also seeing a huge bifurcation in Class A plus buildings, which are highly sustainable, versus Class B and C buildings in the United States. So I think it's the largest bifurcation we've seen in the history of office in the United States. And so it's much more risky if you really aren't a Class A plus building, which really means you're doing something different and really have a sustainable building. And core tenants and buyers right now, they absolutely are just focused on it and need it. And so if we are going to be focused on doing the best buildings and actually creating this long-term value, it's not only a core focus of Skanska, it really is a core focus on our investors and our tenants.
Mm-hmm. So what shifts are we seeing in investments and investors? You just mentioned this bifurcation, for example. Any other trends, and can these give us any indication of what's happening in the market?
We really are starting to see a shift. We're starting to see the bottom. We're starting to see a shift. We're starting to see the market perform differently. We still have a ways to go in the capital markets for investors to sell buildings, but it doesn't really seem like it's that far off. Right now, I see the biggest opportunity is with commercial office, the Class A plus, highly sustainable buildings. There's just dwindling space. There's not enough space. And as you fast forward here, and supply is being cut off. And so in 2025 through 27, there's just not going to be enough office space. And so for us, we really see being able to develop new buildings into that time period is going to be very, very powerful, and investors are going to do very well in that time frame. So we are really, really excited about that. We are having some great success in our portfolio. A building here, actually really close to Seattle in Bellevue, we leased the largest lease in Skanska's history to a company that growing really, really fast and really wants to get their company back to the office. They're a Japanese company, and sustainability was incredibly important to them. So with the right building, you really are seeing them start to perform. You're seeing tenants really start to see that there isn't that much space available, and they need to move if they want to get the right space.
It's this huge opportunity, right? The demand really is greater than the supply looks to be, so there's a real potential there.
Yeah.
And if we flip to the developer side, what are investors looking for when it comes to developers like Skanska? What can Skanska and our equivalent bring to the table?
Yeah, I think we're seen as a leader in the markets we are in. We're in different markets, but definitely Skanska is leading the market. And so when people think about sustainability, often we are somebody who they reach out to, especially if they have high sustainability goals, and or when we engage with a tenant, they don't always know. They don't always know, for instance, how sustainable the 8 might be. And when they tour and learn and go, oh my gosh, this building is exactly what we are looking for, from not only the location, the amenities, and to help them with their sustainability goals, it is a really important factor often. I mean, in summary, I do think, we are in a position here where for investors, the market appears to have bottomed here. We are starting to move forward, in an improving market. And this space is going to be much more active. And so developing the best buildings with, high sustainability that's future-proof, because it is going to be more important in the future, is just going to be incredibly important. And both in office and multifamily, supply really is being cut off, and demand is increasing for the best buildings with these features we've been talking about. And so even though the market right now is a little soft, given the market cycle here with high interest rates, that is part of the business. That is part of the cycle and part of what happens. And so I think we are really positioned to be in a great place as we start to come out of this, forecasted here in 25 and 26.
Okay, great. Murphy McCullough, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights for us. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Both Cecilia and Murphy were clear that investors are looking for top-quality properties at the expense of less desirable ones. This shift is commonly called the flight to quality. So what makes a top-tier property? Location is still a leading consideration, along with high sustainability values and good amenities and services. The property needs to be attractive for tenants now and into the future. The future is also a key aspect that both guests raised. Property investors are looking at the long term, so they need to know that they will continue to earn good returns long into the future. Sustainability plays an important role here in securing future returns. It makes a property more attractive to tenants, and in Europe, it provides access to better bank financing. This shift to higher quality, more sustainable properties is helping investors achieve both better long-term returns and reach their own goals within sustainability. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out in the future. If you have any thoughts about this episode or ideas for new ones to come, don't hesitate to reach out to podcast@skanska.com. We'd love to hear from you. This is a podcast from Skanska, a leading property development and construction group. To find out more about how we and others are creating healthy, resilient communities and spaces, visit us at foresight.skanska.com. I'm Emily Mandel. Thank you for joining us as we explore shaping sustainable places.